All right, so we're here, part 3 of this long chapter in information security program development. And so we're going to talk about this policy development, third-party risk management, internal and external partnerships, and compliance and personnel. And there'll be a lot more of this in future lectures. So you develop a policy, and the policy is sort of a vague general document. It's a foundational document from which everything else goes. It defines your principles and the general actions you're going to do to protect your assets and your personnel. And this policy is intended to go to everybody. Everybody that works at your company is supposed to know about the policy, even temporary workers and so on. This is why when you call a company and try to get them to tell you something, they'll say that's against policy. Everybody's supposed to know what the policy is. So it should be easily accessible. It should be easy for everyone to find. They should be required to sign a document saying they've read it or something. There should be annual training to make sure everybody knows the policy. So a lot of considerations go into making that policy. You've got legal requirements and standards. You have to decide your business's risk appetite and what kind of controls and your culture. This is a big thing, as the CSO of FireEye that talked to us talked about this. You've got employees at your company that have been there for a long time, and they've sort of gone to seed. They don't really stay up with modern things, and yet they're still there and they're still important at the company. So that's the kind of thing that happens in organizational culture. You've got traditions and established ways of doing things, and you have to respect that and fit into it. If you have a disruptive change in the policy, you're going to have trouble. And we see this at Coinbase. I mean, Coinbase just tried to declare that we are going to have no politics in the workplace anymore, which is quite different than most businesses around here that are quite good. They want to be a good guy. They want to be politically, on the good side of things, and lost a bunch of employees just from doing that. So, it's you have a culture that determines such things. And if you decide to change it, then you're going to disorient people. So you've got to, your policies and controls can't contradict each other. This is very bad when they tell you to do something, but you have to do something else. And you have to understand it. So you can't have your policies be all technical where the non-technical people can't understand it. And you have to set good examples at the top. You can't have the people at the top blatantly violating the policy, which has got people a lot in trouble in the UK, where a lot of the top ministers that are locking everything down with coronavirus are then caught sneaking off to do what they're not supposed to be doing. And you can't have that. So your policy structure will specify what you're allowed to do on the assets, whether you're allowed to use mobile devices, and probably if you do allow mobile devices, you force them to have a mobile device management app on it. So you're still under control of the company, what they can do with information, passwords, whether they can use personal devices, how to handle incidents, what your social media policy is. A fairly common thing has been that a company has no official social media policy. Then people start tweeting and putting stuff on Facebook they don't like. Then they try and fire them. And they say, well, you never told me what I was allowed to say on social media, so you can't fire me for that. So, you have to think of that. And probably what you want to say is that you cannot identify yourself as an employee of the company, so it seems like you're making an official statement if you aren't, or something like that. And you probably ought to have an official social media presence. One thing you should be doing is scanning social media to see if anybody complains about your company there and responding. Usually when I complain on Twitter about a company, somebody from that company responds to me quickly. I'm the help desk. How can I help you? That's a good thing to do. You don't want people complaining about you and having those complaints just spread across the social media and have no response, which is what will happen otherwise. You got laws, you got workplace safety. If you break policies, you have to specify what the consequences are. And now you got cloud computing, which we're going to talk a lot more about later, and third parties. You are using other people's assets to do your business, and they're holding your data, and you have to consider what they're doing with it. So you have to put the policy so everybody can get it. The top executives should make it clear that everybody's involved, everybody's subject to policy, even high executives. And so then you get down to third-party risk management. You're outsourcing stuff. Everybody is outsourcing like crazy onto Azure, into Amazon, just everywhere. But remember, you cannot outsource responsibility. If you hire somebody else to do some of your work, like you put some of your work in another company and they do the work, you are still responsible for the quality of that work. So if you outsource somebody else, this happened to Kaiser. Kaiser outsourced their data entry to a data entry company. So they had to type in all this information about customers' medical data. And then they got an email from Pakistan saying, you didn't pay me my $1 a day. If you don't do it, I'm going to dump these medical records on the internet. And they said, why is our data in Pakistan? We never meant for it to be there. They outsourced it to an American company who then re-outsourced it to Pakistan without telling them, in violation of all kinds of regulations. And that was Kaiser's fault. You can't say, my contractor did it, it's not my fault. You are responsible for what your contractor does. If you hire an idiot and they do something stupid, you're still responsible to say, why did you hire an idiot? Why didn't you audit them and see what they were doing? They're just like your employee at that point. You're responsible for what they really do. And so that's an issue here. You can outsource work, but you cannot outsource responsibility. And that's a big issue as we go ahead. But whoever you get to do your work, you must make sure that they are not doing bad things with your data. Now, a lot of people like to outsource primarily to save money, because you can go to like other areas of the country or other countries where it's cheaper. You might be able to outsource to more highly skilled people. Like, I strongly encourage the college to put the student mail in Gmail, because we can our own mail server, and ran it very badly. It kept going down and having problems. And I said, Google will keep the server up better. So outsourcing to them will result in better experience for the students. They're also an objective company. So if you want to meet some standards or something, they won't have your internal politics. And of course, the main thing is the cost. But there's a lot of risks when you go to third parties. It often ends up costing more than you think. Like, you have to keep making trips out there to solve problems. There's often poor quality because of the loss of control, especially if you offshore. You are hiring people you don't really understand very well. There's nobody there to manage them. You don't really know what they're doing. And I've seen, videos of where they have news agencies go in and they watch people in like India working at call centers, and they're shopping and they're writing down all the credit card numbers. And then after work, they just go and sell the credit card numbers to thieves who will now steal money from those people. And they said this is not even illegal in their country. And that's the thing. How do you know that kind of stuff is not happening? And it's hard to know that as you outsource. They might make mistakes. They might fail to live up to their promises. They might have different priorities, and you now have a problem. If it was someone you hired in your company, you could punish them, train them, replace them easily. But if they're an outsourced company, you really don't have a way to audit what they're doing or punish them very much. So it's a problem. And your employees often have low morale now and don't try very hard and start looking for other jobs when they get the message that you're just outsourcing stuff. So why should I stay here? There's no future in this company. So you have to audit them, and you may have trouble proving that they meet your compliance standards. There may be laws restricting what you do, especially if you move across borders, and you might have language and time zone problems communicating with your people you outsource to. So one thing you have to do at a company, most of us don't get a chance to plan this stuff. We get thrown into a company that's already running and already probably having a lot of bad habits. So the first thing is to find out, what third parties are we currently using? So you can ask the people to see, are you using this stuff? Ask people, department heads and all the different departments. Your facilities hires people to come in and clean the place and repair things that are outside people. And even though they may not touch the IT systems, they're coming in the buildings and they represent some degree of risk. Your IT is often a place you go because this is where you'll find all the cloud services. And so you can look for data connections. You can look in the firewall and see if we have persistent network connections to other companies. That would indicate we're sending data there. You can look for identity and access management systems to where people are authenticating here, and that authentication token is being sent elsewhere so other people can identify people at our company with federated identity management. And there are cloud access security broker systems you can get just for this purpose, to manage the data and identification information that is being sent to cloud services. And you need one if you want to get control of this stuff. Most companies are out of control, and you have a struggle to get it back in control because little departments in your company have gotten in the habit of just renting an Amazon server and spinning something up and not really telling anybody. So there isn't anybody at your company that actually knows that they're running company business on some server, and you don't really know if that server is being patched. You don't know if it's being audited for compliance, and so on. So there's a lot of applications out there. You can buy products like these designed to handle your third-party vendors. And so now you've got all these vendors all over the place, and how are you going to deal with it? You have to prioritize it, just like any other security risk. So you have to decide which vendors really are worth spending your time carefully auditing them. So consider, how much sensitive data they've got, how much important they are to the functionality of your business, whether they have physical access to the buildings or network access to your systems, and your contractual obligations. These are considerations that will help you decide which vendors are the high priority ones to audit for their practices. So you might consider customer data volume more than 10 million records. That's high. Here's medium, here's low. How much internal data volume, physical access, and system access. These are the kind of things you will consider in deciding whether this vendor is a high risk or a low risk or a high criticality is probably the thing to say. And then you can expend your efforts making sure that the highly critical outsourced vendors are obeying your rules. So let's take a look at the Cahoots, which I thought I had open. Yeah, I do. All right. 164C1, which is this one. All right. All right, we've got 5. Might be 1 or 2 more coming. Apparently not. All right. All right. What's the third-party benefit that auditors like? Right, objectivity, this is really important. For example, right now in the federal government, there's a huge problem. The people like the FBI director don't dare to tell the truth to the president because he'll fire them. And that's the sort of pressure that an external company won't have. So you'll have more objectivity. They won't be inhibited by the internal politics of your company. All right. So what risk comes from outsourcing a department and then affects other departments? Okay, the morale is the problem. Once people hear that some department's getting outsourced, they'll wonder if their department's getting outsourced, and that will affect, sort of poison the culture of the company. All right. What will lower your third-party risk? That's it. These other products just protect your network. The cloud access security broker is there to protect you from risks associated with your cloud services. All right, what vendors should be subject to thorough diligence? The ones handling sensitive data. This is the same answer for all of security. What's the most important issue to handle? There's no generic answer, but the answer is figure out what the biggest risk to your business is under your conditions. That's the place where you have to focus your attention. And you have to consider your data and how important it is to you. That's how you choose which vendor is the most important to audit. All right, and what stakeholder often has third-party relationships that don't involve IT? That's facilities. Facilities hire people that come into your buildings and often have no access to IT, but they are an issue. All right. It was Target that got hacked because of the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company. Spoof key. Spoof key might be Shannon. Okay, good. I see they come out of the closet in the chat. Good. All right. So, all right. All right, so if you're going to assess what your third parties are doing, the simplest thing to do is just send them a questionnaire. Then they have supposed to fill that out, and then you at least know what they claim to be doing. You can see if their stated activities are satisfactory. More than if they're not so sure about that, or you have a higher degree of concern, then you would confirm it, demanding evidence, or even visit them, or make sure that they comply with an external standard like ISO 27001 or SOC 2. Those would be other ways to make sure they're doing proper things. You can also go to third-party providers, like there are threat intelligence providers and threat intelligence brokers. There are business intelligence brokers who examine companies and issue a report on what we think of this company, whether we think they're going to stay in business, whether we think they're trustworthy. That's the kind of thing. They rate on the health, they provide reports on the health of companies. And then there's external cyber intelligence that will do things like scan networks to see how secure they are and scan the deep web behind Tor and find out if stolen data from this company is appearing there, which of course indicates that they have a security problem. So other things you might do is you might do your own scans. You might in principle pay for pen testers to go attack them. And you might demand intrusive monitoring. I've seen on Twitter security professionals saying they're doing this. Other companies are demanding immediate access to our logs. And that is something some people do. That's very intrusive, where you actually let somebody else see your internal data. So you'd have to be a really important customer to have that sort of thing happen. But it can technically be done that you forward your logs to some other country, some other company. It's just a very close business relationship at that point. You're almost inside the company then. And so here's different risk levels. You might use a questionnaire and have a different kind of questionnaire for high, medium, and low risk. You might do the confirmation only for the high and medium risk and only do the site visits for them, and something like a penetration test only for the highest risk because that's expensive and you'd have to be a pretty important customer for them to agree to that, and so on. You choose you choose which of these techniques to verify things you apply, so and how often you do it, like an annual questionnaire, a quarterly business intelligence report on what a third party thinks of the business, and so on. Annual penetration test, perhaps continuous intrusive monitoring. You're just continually picking up logs from them, and you'll immediately be alerted if something bad happens. That would be very expensive and very intrusive, so you'd only do that if whatever's happening is very critical and worth a lot to you. All right, so when you find something that you don't like, now how can you get your cloud broker to do something better? Well, some of them, like huge ones like Azure and Amazon, really have levels of service. And they would say, well, if you want that, just buy the next level of service. And that would be a simple answer. But a lot of the times they'll just say, look, we don't bother doing these things here, so get lost. And then you have to say, the only thing you can really do is stop paying them or complain about them publicly and damage their reputation. That's really the only leverage you have over a typical third party, especially if you're going across national boundaries where you probably can't even legally sue. So it's an issue to have enforcement mechanisms. So you might have a service level agreement where they sign a contract and there are specified penalties for failing to live up to it. They promise a certain level of quality. They promise continuity and employee integrity where they do background checks and hopefully prevent their employees from stealing your data. Make it clear who owns stuff and who's in charge. These are contractual provisions that would help. You have a schedule of events. Things have to be finished on time or there are penalties. And you have some way to resolve disputes and rules about when you pay and what you pay. So these are things you can address in the contract. And if you do have a problem, if the questionnaire reveals that they are doing something that is unacceptable to your company, the example given here is no password changes, which is a really old idea. The government used to recommend that passwords be changed quarterly or something, and now they have realized that does more harm than good, and that's no longer recommended. So I think your book is a little out of date with this example. But if they have some kind of security policy you don't like a policy that lets people put data on home computers or something, then you talk to them and try to talk them into doing it your way, or maybe you can reach an agreement where there is some compensating control so that the risk to you is lowered. Other than that, you're going to have to try and like move to another vendor or something, which is of course disruptive. So it would be nice to address security concerns at onboarding. When you begin discussing with a company before you sign a contract, before they have any of your data, that's upfront due diligence. That would be the ideal situation. Unfortunately, what you often have at companies is they're already doing things in the cloud, then they hire a security professional, and you're trying to limit the harm of relationships that are already there, which probably in retrospect are not wise relationships to have, but now they're built into the company. So you can have all these issues raised in your contract, the right to audit, the right to do penetration tests, they need to inform us of incidents, have insurance, and so on. Those are all good things to have in a contract if you can negotiate these security clauses before the contract is signed. After you have an incident, if you get hacked or they get hacked, now you've got a problem. There's two sets of logs, two sets of rules, and firewalls and everything, and it's going to be harder to figure out how to track down the attackers and make sure you've really kicked them out and you've really assessed all the damage they did. It's going to be an issue. And then, so there's internal partnerships in your company where you make a deal with other divisions of your own company, so you can deputize team members from other groups to be the security representative there, and then they have a local security representative. This is a really good idea. This, I have heard, is why Africa did so well in the current pandemic, because they did not have one national government issuing orders and all the people not trusting the government and disobeying the orders the way we have here, except the national government didn't even issue any orders, but they have that in Britain. National government declares things and people just don't obey. But in Africa, because of the previous epidemics they dealt with, like the Ebola, they have made local health officers in every little village. Somebody you know and already trust is responsible for like giving you health information. So when you tell people it's time to lock down, it's time to take a vaccine, you need to wash your hands, you need to stop gathering, it's not some distant person you don't trust telling you that, it's someone local. And the same thing applies at your company. You want to have a security champion inside a department, hopefully, to help communicate to people in an appropriate language what they can do to lower the risk in their environment. And that way you don't have the typical problem. I remember the company I worked at, they would upgrade the network. They wouldn't tell you anything. You'd come in on Monday morning, all the trash cans would be full of beer bottles. They would have spent all weekend in there upgrading stuff, and nothing worked every time. They didn't talk to us and find out what we were doing. They didn't have any of us there to test our real business activities. So they would call it fixed, but they would have broken something that affected our essential business activities. And that's the failure of having a local representative to help you make security changes and make sure that it actually is not messing up the workflow in a part of your business. So legal is a place you go. Of course, you make contracts and so on. So respond to incidents and limit the risk. You can help by helping the legal team write contracts with the proper security clauses before making a contract. Human resources is the source of a lot of security problems. You should be checking resumes, checking backgrounds, making people sign appropriate documents when they join, and you have to protect the information systems used by human resources that are full of like social security numbers, payrolls, tax information, and stuff that you shouldn't be losing. Then you have internal transfers, and here's where HR helps a lot. You move people from department to department, and you don't want to allow accumulation of privileges. This is certainly true at the college. If you've been an old teacher, you have a whole drawer full of keys, because every time you get a new classroom, they give you a key and they never keep track of them or collect the old keys. You just gain more and more keys, even to rooms you're not using anymore. And that's what happens with accumulation of privileges. But an HR department should not allow that. They should say, you have to be in sales, or you're in management, or you're in development, and you're in one category. And when you're in a category, you move out of the other category. And so you lose the sales access. When you move into development, you gain the development access. That's the kind of thing. So when you offboard people, This is real important. The department should know this person is leaving. They should no longer be able to log in or access secured areas to make sure they don't steal data and pass it on to the next company or sabotage things, collect the assets, sign agreements. This is extremely ineffective in tech worlds. An enormous number of people walk away with company data and company equipment. It is difficult to prevent. And there are a lot of stories about companies getting hacked by their recently fired employees. They obviously have the names and passwords and everything unless you have a proper offboarding process. So then you have to train people, you have to investigate your security incidents and keep proper records so you can in principle go to court if you want to, and discipline people with lesser things like demotion, time off without pay, and so on for violating the policy. Your facilities is physical access to the machine. So you've got to have some way to have guests get a guest badge and some kind of limit, handle your equipment, consider the personnel safety and stop strange people from wandering on the building, usual thing. And then IT, all the stuff that we focus a lot on in our department, of course, access control where you identify everybody and limit what they can do, hardening systems so they don't have default passwords, scanning, patching, putting in firewalls, spam filters, and all that stuff. Monitoring systems for security flaws, monitoring them for violation of policy, and monitoring third-party connections. And then when you're developing your product, you often develop products with security flaws. And so there is a thing called secure development process, largely championed by Microsoft, that had enormous security problems and then gradually developed a better system and became much better. So you have code reviews, security review of the open source software you're using, training of developers to limit the mistakes they make, and then protection of the development process so that people are not allowed to poison your internal supply chain, which has happened. And procurement, it would be nice if you can, before they buy things like routers and servers and stuff, if you can get a security audit before they buy hardware that has flaws. And finance is a place you can go to find out what third-party providers are in use, but it's because they are paying all the bills. So if anybody is using some third-party service, they will ultimately end up in finance, and that is a place where you can find it. But of course, if you find it there, they've already made a contract and already have them in use. So that's not as good as being able to consider the security implications before signing the contract, but it is a place to find out what's going on here as part of your audit, just to find out what the situation is. All right, and so your business unit manager should be in cooperation with the security manager, so you should be able to understand what's going on in the department, and that's why it's important to have a representative of each department that participates with you so you can understand what the consequences are of your security decisions within the department. And so half of all the breaches come from third parties. It's a problem. This happened to BART. There's a time a few years ago when BART was at the center of anonymous activity. They were considered a political problem and people were attacking them to make political points. And they could not hack into BART, but BART had some third party that was selling BART tickets, and they had some customers' credit card numbers. And somebody hacked them and dumped out the credit card numbers to embarrass BART. And BART was considered partially responsible for that, probably correctly. And that's what I was saying. You might secure your structure, but if you don't secure the third parties and they have access to your data, then that's a hole and you're responsible for it. So anyway, this is a common problem. And the number one reason people are reluctant to move to the cloud is because of security, and they are right. An enormous number of breaches come from moving your data to a third party and not understanding how to properly secure it there. So anyway, 4C2 is here. All right, I'll give it 5 more seconds. Oh, okay, good. All right, that must be it. I think that's everybody here. All right. All right. If the vendor is SOC 2 compliant, what kind of assessment is that? That's an external attestation. You meet a standard set by an independent body. All right. What contract provision requires verification of resumes? Employee integrity? Good. All right. What internal partner prevents accumulation of privileges? HR, human resources, is the one that's supposed to know which job category you're in and therefore what you should be allowed to do. All right. What internal partner implements security by design? That's it. That's one of the Microsoft principles of secure product development. All right. eLearn will have to tell me who they are. Okay, good. And that person will have to tell me who they are. Ooh, I know who that is. All right, and I see. Okay, good. I now know who Tubi is. Good. All right. Well, let me stop the recording and post this up.